Do you think time heals all wounds, or some never close?
My sister waited until the dessert was on the table, the candles already burning low, and the waiter halfway through bringing out my graduation cake, to casually drop her bomb like it was just some random piece of gossip she forgot to mention earlier. She tilted her wine glass just enough to make her diamond bracelet catch the light, grinned across the table at our parents, and said, "Oh, by the way, I got the promotion. Senior director. Effective Monday." That moment, that exact second, was when something in me split, not loud, not dramatic, just a clean internal snap. Because for the 100th time in my life, she had done it again. She'd hijacked something that wasn't hers. And like always, everyone else just went along for the ride. No one asked her why she waited until now to say something. No one said, "Let's celebrate Jenna first." Hell, no one even blinked. My mom gasped and clapped her hands together like a middle schooler who just found out her BFF was chosen for cheer captain. My dad smiled and gave her a proud little nod. And the moment that had been built for me, the one I had earned through 4 brutal years of full-time work, night classes, and one mental breakdown I had to hide even from my fiancé, got swallowed whole in 5 seconds flat. And then she had the nerve, the absolute nerve, to smirk in my direction and say, "Sorry, I didn't plan this. But I deserve a win too, right?" I didn't answer. I didn't even fake a smile. I just looked at her, then back down at my plate, and pushed my half-eaten steak around like I was suddenly too full to eat. But inside me, there was no silence. There was fire. Loud, white-hot fire. Not because I was shocked, God, no, not anymore, but because I had let it happen again. I had walked right into it, dressed up, smiling, stupidly believing that for once, this might be my night. My parents had picked a nice restaurant. My fiancé Eric helped plan it. I had even worn that damn navy jumpsuit Lauren had once told me wasn't really my color. And now, I was just scenery in another episode of The Lauren Show. And here's the thing. You might think I'm being dramatic. You might think she was just sharing good news. Can't you be happy for her? But if you've lived this, if you've survived this particular kind of sibling dynamic, then you know exactly what I mean when I say this wasn't about timing. This was about dominance. And she's always known exactly when to throw the spotlight, not just to brighten herself, but to dim everyone else. My graduation wasn't some cute milestone. It was blood, sweat, and sacrifice. I worked 2 jobs to afford tuition without loans. I missed birthdays, vacations, even our grandmother's funeral because I had an ethics paper due and couldn't reschedule. I fell asleep more nights than I can count with my laptop in my lap, my eyes burning, my hands cramping. And for what? For a woman who got handed a promotion on a corporate silver platter to show up at my dinner and turn it into a standing ovation for herself? I felt Eric's hand slide under the table and squeeze mine gently, a small grounding gesture that said, "I see it too." He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Because we both knew this wasn't just bad timing. This was deliberate. Lauren wasn't careless. She was strategic. The rest of the evening blurred together in a haze of forced laughter and polite clinking glasses, the kind of polite family dysfunction that's so well-rehearsed it could win an Emmy. My mom talked about Lauren's new office and how proud she was of both her girls, but her eyes never left Lauren's face. My dad made a dry joke about finally having someone in the family who understands corporate buzzwords. Even the waiter seemed to pick up on the shift, turning the cake presentation into a half-hearted afterthought, mumbling "congrats" like he wasn't quite sure who it was meant for. And me? I smiled. I posed for photos. I even blew out the damn candles. But deep inside, I made a promise I hadn't dared make before. Because here's what I haven't told you yet. I didn't just graduate. I didn't just finish school. I had spent the last 9 months quietly building something mine. I had been working on the paperwork for my own business. A consulting firm. Jenna Harper Strategies, LLC. Registered. Certified. Legit. I hadn't told anyone. Not even Eric. I wanted it to be real first. I wanted to hold it in my hands before I risked hearing Lauren say something like, "Oh, that's cute." But after tonight? After that little smirk and that "I deserve a win too" line? The quiet part of me, the part that had learned how to be invisible around her, started to stretch its arms and stand the hell up. I said nothing that night. I hugged my parents, kissed my fiancé, thanked the waiter, and walked out of that restaurant like nothing was wrong. But my silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't public. It isn't loud. It's not even confrontational. Sometimes, the best revenge is sending a message so subtle, so calm, that it doesn't hit them until it's too late to spin it. And as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling while Lauren's voice echoed in my head, "But I deserve a win too," I smiled to myself. Just a little. Because for the first time in 32 years, I wasn't going to shrink. Not this time. After the dinner, when the last laugh had faded and the lipstick stains on the wine glasses had been cleared away by some poor underpaid waiter who probably thought we were just another happy family celebrating a milestone, I sat in the car next to Eric with my hands still folded neatly in my lap, like I was holding something delicate and fragile, except there was nothing there but restraint. The engine was running, the windows fogged just slightly from the leftover heat of too many bodies in a small restaurant space, and Eric hadn't said a word since we got in, but the silence wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence where every unspoken word hangs in the air like a thread, taut and waiting to snap. And then, almost casually, but with that low, sharp edge he uses when he's frustrated but trying to be kind, he turned to me and asked, "You gonna let her take this one too?" I didn't respond right away, not because I didn't have an answer, but because hearing it spoken out loud, this unspoken truth that had followed me like a shadow since I was old enough to understand what jealousy felt like, made my throat tighten in a way that wasn't just about hurt. It was about recognition. Because I knew what he meant. And worse, I knew he was right. It wasn't just about this one dinner. It wasn't even about the promotion. It was about every single moment in my life where my sister had seen something good happening for me and, instead of stepping back and celebrating like a normal person, had found a way, subtle, always subtle, to make herself the main character. And every time, like clockwork, I had smiled and nodded and told myself it wasn't worth the fight. That I was the mature one. That keeping the peace mattered more than keeping my dignity intact. But deep down, I knew I'd been lying to myself. When I got home, still in my heels, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the closet door, but what I saw wasn't the reflection in the mirror or the piles of folded laundry I still hadn't put away. It was a flicker reel of moments I had buried so deep. I almost forgot they were real. Like when I was 10 and made the honor roll for the first time, and Lauren told everyone I only got it because my teacher liked quiet girls. Or when I got into my college of choice, after months of essays and applications and tears she never saw, and she accidentally announced her engagement the same day. At the time, I told myself it was coincidence. Life just happens that way. Timing isn't personal. But you can only trip over the same rug so many times before you stop calling it clumsiness and start admitting someone keeps moving it. The worst, though, the one that still made my stomach tighten whenever I thought about it, happened just 2 years ago. I had gone for a wedding dress fitting alone, because Mom had a doctor's appointment and Lauren said she wasn't feeling great. I didn't mind. I liked the quiet. The moment felt mine. But halfway through the appointment, Lauren showed up out of nowhere with a latte and a half-hearted smile and insisted on just watching. I was mid-spin in the mirror, veil in place, my cheeks flushed from laughter and champagne, when she leaned a little too close with her coffee and accidentally spilled it, hazelnut latte, extra syrup, right down the front of the ivory bodice. The gasp from the consultant, the awkward apologies, the tears I blinked back while pretending I wasn't crying, it all blurred into a fog of humiliation I refused to name. She apologized, of course. So sincerely. But I remember the way her eyes flicked to the mirror, and in that moment, I realized she hadn't come to celebrate me. She came to take something back. And the worst part? I forgave her. Like always. Because she was my sister. Because I believed, truly believed, that love meant forgiveness, even when the same wounds kept reopening like clockwork. But somewhere between that spilled latte and the steak dinner where she turned my graduation into her personal stage, I stopped believing that love was supposed to hurt like that. I stopped pretending it was just bad timing or social clumsiness or whatever excuse I used to comfort myself into submission. People like Lauren don't just stumble into the spotlight. They orchestrate it. They curate their moments with the kind of precision that makes it feel accidental, but if you pay attention, really pay attention, you start to see the cracks in the show. You start to recognize the way they wait until your candle is lit to blow out their own. Not out of celebration. Out of competition. Eric told me once, back when we were still dating, and I had complained about Lauren dominating every conversation at Thanksgiving, that some people don't want to be loved, they want to be worshipped. And if you stop clapping, even for a second, they'll call you disloyal. He said it like he was joking, but I never forgot it. Because he was right. Lauren didn't want love. She wanted the roar of applause. And I had been her quietest, most dependable fan. But that night, something shifted. Not dramatically. Not with fireworks or screaming or confrontation. I didn't storm out of the restaurant or call her out at the table. I didn't even unfriend her from social media or block her number. I simply decided that I was done applauding. I was done pretending that every time she stole the stage, it was an accident. I was done folding myself smaller so she could stretch larger. Because the truth is, I wasn't angry about the dinner. Not really. I was angry about all the dinners, all the birthdays, all the small and large milestones that had somehow turned into her spotlight. I was angry that I had let it happen. That I had made peace more important than my own pride. That I had confused silence with strength, when really, it was just fear in a prettier dress. So I didn't answer Eric's question in the car. Not then. But later that night, as I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and my business license confirmation still fresh in my inbox, I looked at my name in that official font, Jenna Harper Strategies, LLC, and I whispered, not this time. Because I wasn't going to fight her for the spotlight. I was going to build my own damn stage. And if she wanted to try and steal that, well, this time I'd be ready. There's a very specific kind of ache that settles in your chest when you realize the people who are supposed to know you best, the ones who watched you grow up, who were there when you scraped your knees and sobbed over your first heartbreak, have absolutely no idea what it costs you to keep pretending everything's fine just to make them comfortable. It's like walking around your own life with a mask that's slowly suffocating you, but everyone tells you how beautiful it looks, so you keep it on, keep smiling, keep swallowing the words you want to scream because God forbid you make a scene. For 3 days after that dinner, I moved through life in this strange fog that wasn't quite anger, wasn't quite sadness, but something heavier and more exhausting than either. It was the weight of too many small betrayals, layered over time like sediment, pressing down on my ribs until it felt like I was constantly out of breath. I went to work. I replied to emails. I even answered my mom's call when she sent me a text that read, "Wasn't Lauren's news so unexpected?" followed by a nauseating string of exclamation marks that made me want to throw my phone into the nearest river. I didn't mention that I hadn't slept since the dinner, that I kept replaying her voice in my head like a skipping record, that little half laugh when she said, "But I deserve a win too." As if what I had achieved, finishing a brutal grad program, launching a side hustle, staying afloat financially, emotionally, mentally, was something she could casually step over in heels without even looking down. I kept thinking about that line. I rolled it around in my mind like a sour candy I couldn't spit out. Sorry, I didn't plan this, but I deserve a win too. That phrasing stuck with me. Not just the entitlement of it, but the way she said it, like she genuinely believed she was owed something simply by virtue of being who she was. And the unspoken part of that sentence, the part she didn't have to say because I've heard it in her tone 1,000 times before, was, "And your win doesn't really count if I'm not winning louder." By Thursday evening, I had stopped being sad. Something colder had taken its place. A calm, methodical kind of clarity that I hadn't felt in a long time, maybe ever. I sat at the kitchen table, lit a single candle for no reason other than it smelled like cedar and tobacco and made me feel like I had control over something, and I opened the envelope that had arrived that morning from the Secretary of State's office. Inside was my official business registration. The paper felt heavier than it looked, the kind of paper you almost want to frame, not because it's beautiful, but because it represents every late night you pushed through when you wanted to quit, every self-doubt you strangled into silence. Every time you convinced yourself that maybe, just maybe, you were meant to build something of your own. I stared at my name on that certificate, Jenna Harper, founder and managing director of Jenna Harper Strategies, and for the first time since the dinner, I didn't feel like I had something to prove. I felt like I had something to protect. The idea came to me in an instant, not out of pettiness, not even out of revenge, but out of an almost scientific curiosity. What would happen if I gave Lauren a taste of her own medicine? What if, instead of confronting her or crying about it or asking for an apology she'd never sincerely give, I just flipped the script? Not with drama, not with shouting, but with precision. Quiet, undeniable precision. So I went online, ordered one of those sleek black gift boxes with the magnetic clasp, the kind you'd send if you wanted to impress a client or propose to a business partner, and inside, I placed only two things. First, a neatly folded copy of my business license, printed on the same kind of expensive paper she would associate with legal authority and high-stakes success. Second, a small white note card, handwritten in my cleanest cursive, which read, "You are right. You do deserve a win. This one's mine." That was it. No fanfare. No hashtags. No Instagram reveal. Just the truth, packaged and delivered. I didn't send it anonymously. I didn't hide my name or my return address. I wanted her to know exactly where it came from, because I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't shrinking myself into the background of my own story just so she could shine a little brighter. I was standing still, holding my ground, and if she wanted to take something from me again, she'd have to look me dead in the eye and try. The box arrived on Saturday. I know because she called me less than 2 hours after it was marked delivered. She didn't start with hello. She didn't even ask me why. The first thing she said, in a voice so sharp it could have cut glass, was really one word. Just that. But the way she said it? Like I had violated some sacred rule of our twisted dynamic. Like I had done something unspeakably selfish by not letting her be the hero in my own life story. I didn't respond right away, and when I didn't fill the silence, she added, "You just had to make it about you." Not angrily, not even sarcastically, more like a wounded accusation, as if I'd committed some betrayal by daring to celebrate myself in a way she couldn't control. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply said I didn't make it about me. It already was. And then I hung up. For the first time in decades of being her younger sister, I wasn't sitting in the rubble of another stolen moment, trying to piece together the wreckage and figure out how to rebuild. I was standing in something whole. Something mine. And while I knew she would twist the narrative, as she always did, call our mother, post vague social media quotes about betrayal, maybe even send me some passive-aggressive email laced with corporate jargon, none of it mattered. Because this wasn't about her anymore. This wasn't about taking something from her. It was about finally giving something to myself. A win that wasn't performative. A success that didn't need her approval. A moment that didn't end in apology. And this time, I wasn't sorry. Not even a little. There is something unnerving about silence that doesn't come from peace, but from the absence of control, the kind of silence that creeps in when someone used to commanding the room suddenly finds herself sidelined, no longer the star of the performance she believed would always revolve around her. In the days following the delivery of the gift box, the one with my business license and the short, pointed note that offered no flattery, no compromise, no opening for her to twist the story back into a drama with her at the center, Lauren didn't erupt in the way I'd expected. There was no immediate firestorm of calls, no teary voice messages pleading for understanding, no attempt to reframe her outburst as just being overwhelmed, which was her favorite go-to defense when called out on bad behavior. Instead, she went eerily quiet, which, to anyone else, might have seemed like a positive development, but to me, it was the equivalent of standing in a field and watching the birds vanish before a tornado. It wasn't until the third day that the storm started to form, not with her voice, but with something even more calculated, the family group chat. A place that had, for the most part, been reserved for holiday plans, birthday reminders, and the occasional photo of someone's dinner or pet, suddenly became the stage for a new kind of performance, one that was all subtext and emotional manipulation. It began innocently enough, or at least it would have seemed so to someone unfamiliar with Lauren's long history of veiled jabs and victim playing. She posted a photo of her new office, captioned with, "Finally settling into the new role. Still can't believe it happened." Some people get to feel proud. Others don't understand what that means. No names, no direct accusations, just a baited line thrown into familiar waters, trusting that someone, likely my mother, would bite. And of course, she did. My mom responded almost instantly with a stream of encouragement and gentle platitudes about how everyone's journey looks different, and you should be proud of yourself no matter what others say. I read the exchange in silence, sitting at my desk with a mug of untouched coffee growing cold beside me, staring at the screen and feeling that old, acidic ache crawling up the back of my throat, the one that used to rise every time I was made out to be the cold one. The ungrateful one, the one who couldn't just let things go. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I knew my silence, this new kind of silence, not passive, not fearful, but firm and immovable, was eating at her more than any words ever could. Because people like Lauren, people who rely on twisting narratives and recentering themselves in every room, don't know what to do when their opponent simply refuses to play. But the quiet couldn't last forever. It never does with her. That Sunday, just as I was settling into the rare comfort of a morning without obligation, still in my robe, hair damp from the shower, I heard the unmistakable sound of a car door slamming outside. I glanced through the window, and there she was, heels, sunglasses, and that tight, polished smile she wore like armor, walking up the driveway like she'd been invited. I didn't move. I didn't open the door. I waited until she rang the bell, 3 times in quick succession, her impatience bleeding through the glass. When I finally opened the door, I didn't offer her a hug or a greeting, just stepped aside and let her in, because I knew that whatever she had come to say, it wasn't going to be anything I hadn't heard before, some version of "you hurt me," repackaged as moral superiority, polished with just enough faux vulnerability to confuse anyone who didn't know the script by heart. She didn't waste time pretending this was about anything else. She stood in the center of my living room, arms folded, eyes scanning the space like she was evaluating its worth, and said, "I just don't understand why you had to embarrass me like that." I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I just looked at her and said, "That box wasn't about you. It was about me." She scoffed, like the idea that something could exist outside the orbit of her emotional needs was absurd, and replied, "You made me look petty. Like I ruined your dinner. That wasn't fair." There it was. The desperate grasp for control, for image management, for the rewriting of events so that she could be the one who had been wronged. But I didn't offer her a bridge back to comfort. I didn't nod sympathetically or soften my tone to ease her discomfort. I simply stood there, grounded in something new, pride, maybe, or just the relief of not bending. "You did ruin it," I said, my voice steady, "and you've done it before. You've done it my whole life. I didn't make you look petty. You did that all on your own." She stared at me for a long moment, her jaw clenched, nostrils flared slightly, that familiar flicker of disbelief in her eyes, because what she was hearing wasn't just resistance, it was the complete absence of fear. And she didn't know what to do with that. Not when her usual weapons, guilt, charm, tears, had no effect. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, a silent reminder that the world outside this moment was still spinning, that emails still needed answering, that deadlines loomed. But I didn't move. I waited. And after a pause that stretched just long enough to make her uncomfortable, she said, "I just wanted one thing that wasn't about you." It was the closest she'd ever come to admitting the truth. That this wasn't about coincidence or bad timing or misunderstood intentions. This was about her needing to win, needing to be first, needing to be the loudest voice in every room, even if it meant stealing the air from someone else's lungs. I didn't pity her. I didn't comfort her. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You've had everything. Attention, praise, support. You just couldn't stand that I had something that wasn't filtered through you." She didn't respond. She just stood there, blinking rapidly, the way she used to when she was about to cry, but didn't want to ruin her makeup. Then, without another word, she turned and walked toward the door. I didn't stop her. I didn't follow. I simply said, as the door swung open, "I'm done shrinking for you." And that was it. She left. No slammed door. No final word. Just the sound of her heels clicking down the driveway, fading into the distance. Later that evening, my mother called. I didn't answer. I knew what it would be, some variation of "can't you two just move on?" or "you know how she is." But I didn't care. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one trying to fix something I hadn't broken. I wasn't the one reaching across a chasm built on her need to stand taller by pushing me lower. I had stopped playing the game. And it was the most powerful thing I'd ever done. There is a strange, hollow calm that follows moments of long-awaited confrontation, a kind of echoing stillness that lingers not because everything has been resolved, but because something irreversible has shifted. Like tectonic plates beneath the surface of your own life have finally moved after years of pressure and quiet resistance, releasing a kind of emotional quake that no one else seems to notice, but you feel deep in your bones with every breath you take. In the days after Lauren walked out of my house, with her expensive shoes clicking indignantly against the pavement and her pride folded up inside her designer handbag like something she planned to return later for a refund, I found myself moving through my routines with a sense of distance, like I was watching myself from outside, aware that something fundamental had changed, but still unsure whether it was victory, grief, or something murkier. I didn't talk about it with anyone, not even Eric, who gave me space with the kind of quiet patience that can only come from someone who knows the damage caused by years of emotional manipulation cloaked in the language of love. He didn't ask what she said, didn't push for details, just held me a little longer that night and kissed my forehead in the dark like he was proud of me for something I hadn't yet figured out how to be proud of myself. Because the truth is, even after all the clarity, even after all the moments of sharp realization and quiet rebellion, there was still a part of me, a tired, aching part, that longed for something as simple and foolish as peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from surrendering, not anymore, but the kind that allows you to walk into a room with your sister and not brace yourself for the blow. But that kind of peace, I've come to learn, is not something you can build alone, and it's certainly not something you can force from someone who believes every shared moment is a zero-sum game. And so, when Lauren reached out again, 3 days later, asking if we could just talk, I hesitated, not because I was afraid, not this time, but because I no longer trusted the invitation. I no longer believed that she wanted reconciliation. I believed she wanted a rewrite, a revision of events where she could cast herself as misunderstood and me as unforgiving, where she could twist sincerity into cruelty and wear victimhood like a well-fitted coat. Still, I agreed to meet. Maybe because some part of me wanted closure, or maybe because, after everything, I still didn't fully believe that standing my ground wouldn't come with some cost I hadn't calculated. We met at a quiet cafe, one of those neutral spaces where nothing personal can linger too long in the air, where even the barista keeps their eyes averted as if trained to ignore family drama unfolding over cappuccinos and carefully arranged avocado toast. She arrived 5 minutes late, as always, perfectly styled and deliberately casual, like this was just another ordinary check-in between sisters. But there was a tension in her shoulders, a guardedness in her eyes, that betrayed the performance. We exchanged pleasantries like strangers, weather, traffic, the bitterness of the coffee, and then, as if waiting for a script to kick in, she leaned in and said, "I've been thinking a lot about what happened. And I just don't get why you've been so cold." Cold. That was the word she used. Not angry, not hurt, not distant, cold. Because in her world, emotional restraint is seen as punishment, not protection. In her world, love is loud and dramatic and public, and silence is cruelty, because it's the one thing she can't spin into applause. I looked at her across the table, studied her face the way you do when you're trying to see someone clearly after years of squinting through the fog of history and obligation, and I said, carefully, "I'm not cold, Lauren. I'm just done pretending your choices don't affect me. I'm done smiling through every moment you make about yourself. I'm done giving you the benefit of the doubt when all you've ever given me is your back. She blinked, clearly not expecting that much honesty served so plainly. Her mouth opened, then closed again, like she couldn't decide whether to argue or play the part of the hurt sibling. Eventually, she settled on the latter. I never meant to hurt you. I don't know. I've always felt like I was in your shadow. That sentence, that one line, hit me like a slap, not because it was cruel, but because it was such a deeply false narrative that it made me question if we'd lived in the same reality all these years. Her shadow? The girl who monopolized every room, who redirected every conversation, who interrupted every moment of mine with a story of her own triumphs. The girl whose needs were always louder, always more urgent, always more worthy of attention. I laughed. Not out of mockery, but because I couldn't believe how wide the gulf between our perspectives really was. Lauren, I said slowly, choosing each word like it was glass I was laying down between us, you've never been in my shadow. You just couldn't stand that I didn't need a spotlight to feel whole. And in that moment, something in her broke, not dramatically, not with tears or shouting, but in the quiet way a person realizes that they've been chasing the wrong thing for far too long. Her posture softened, her eyes flickered with something close to shame, and for a second, I saw the girl she used to be, before all the posturing, before the need to win, before she decided that being loud was the only way to matter. I guess I just wanted to be seen, she whispered, not quite looking at me, not quite asking for forgiveness. I nodded. We all do, but not at someone else's expense. She didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. We sat there a few moments longer, the silence between us no longer hostile, but not exactly warm either, more like the space after a storm when the clouds begin to clear, but the damage is still there, still wet and splintered and real. Eventually, she stood, said she had a meeting, and left with a half-smile that didn't reach her eyes. I stayed behind, finishing my coffee, watching the steam curl and fade into the air like something finally released. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I felt still. And maybe that was enough. Because I had said the truth, without apology, without shrinking, without stepping back into the box she'd always tried to keep me in. I had claimed my own story, not to spite her, not to punish her, but to finally live in it fully, without interruption. And as I walked home, the afternoon light catching on the edges of the sidewalk like a promise of something better ahead, I couldn't help but wonder, was this the end of our cycle, or just another chapter in a story I was no longer willing to co-write? I may never get the answer. But for the first time in my life, I no longer need one.